we need to recognize and rail against the unfair media coverage of the Trump administration. Now, again, I'm not saying that we need to be apologists for the Trump administration. I'm not saying that we need to be sycophantically in favor of everything that Donald Trump does. There are plenty of policies and positions that I talk about on my podcasts that are different and challenge the Trump administration. But the Badstream media, the mainstream media's coverage is ridiculous. I am Steve Gibson reporting to you in the capacity of a political commentator and the author of Logic's Dictate. I'm going to ask again if you can support this content by subscribing and following and liking so that I can continue to be in a position to provide you the kind of balanced reporting that the mainstream media is incapable of doing. In the Wall Street Journal today, it's interesting, two authors, Mark Penn and Andrew Stein. Mr. Penn was a pollster and advisor to the Clintons, and Mr. Stein served as New York City Council president. These are not Republican conservative stalwarts. These are folks that are people that were mainstream in the Democratic Party, and they're making the observation that on Iran is only bad news fit to print. They did an analysis of the kinds of coverage that the mainstream media is reporting with respect to the Iran war. Quote, inside this particular paper are 6 more pages of war headlines, almost all relentlessly negative, end quote. Why can't the reporting establish positions such as getting rid of a despot? Why can't the reporting talk about the type of killings that the Iranian regime engaged in across the decades? This is not just the recent killings associated with putting down the protests. This is the process of eliminating any level of opposition, of stamping down any freedoms associated with females, of attacking any type of contrary religious belief, of espousing to America and holding people responsible for having any political view different than to America. There should be no question that the mainstream media should be able to get behind a policy and process that attacks that regime, that offers freedom to folks that are associated with fighting that type of regime. But that's not what you have. What you have are articles such as, for Trump and Rubio, it's destroy and deal. U.S. war alliance with Israel is reshaping the Middle East but carries risk. Again, these are, well, the other article, which I think is even more salient, is Netanyahu has war he always wanted, but on Trump's terms. These are slanted coverages rather than coverage whereby the negotiators, Mr. Witkoff, one of them, commented that the Iranians were bragging about the fact that they had nuclear capability at their hands. There was a very real prospect that nuclear capability, including ballistic missiles, was going to be something that the Iranians were arriving at. And that was it. Maybe that was bluster, maybe that was a threat, but no matter what it was, it meant that the Trump administration legitimately had concerns about a nuclear capability. A justification for the attacks were in and of itself dealing with that potential nuclear capability. You don't have uranium enrichment programs buried deep under the earth and hide it there if it was just used for energy purposes. There should be no question, therefore, that the media should be, in a balanced way, saying, okay, let's take a look at whether or not the Trump administration is appropriately dealing with a serious threat to the United States with respect to having a regime that wants America being enabled with nuclear weapons. That analysis has been scant at best. Now, we go back to the mid-'80s when what were called peaceniks at the time, railing against the Reagan military buildup, saying that Reagan was going to bring us to war and that Reagan was nothing more than a warmonger. Well, history proved them wrong, and the adage now, peace through strength, that was associated with Ronald Reagan is oft used by people to recognize that to deal with tyrannical, bullying, despotic regimes, you need peace through strength. We should have learned generally the lesson. The Republicans, for the most part, did. But the Democrats should have learned the lesson of the 1980s and understood the incredible benefit. And using the word incredible is apt at this time because it means it was hard to believe that the Reagan policies would have brought about the disintegration of the Soviet Union in the early 1980s. Yet that is exactly what happened. The Democrats today need to be held to account to learn that history lesson, to learn the lesson that Churchill taught us when fighting Hitler, that there is a rightness, there is a benefit, there is a correctness to exercising the appropriate use of strategic power. And there's no way in the world that the mainstream media isn't able to chronologue those occurrences and apply them as analogies to modern times in the fight that is being undertaken currently. The fact that the New York Times, as an example, is just so hell-bent at finding every possible angle to attack the Trump administration is a tremendous disservice to America, is a tremendous disservice to the First Amendment. We want to uphold the First Amendment and the freedom of the press. But the freedom of the press should come with responsibility, journalistic responsibility, not a constant drumbeat of a political tirade instituted by the media against the Trump administration. There is no reason that modern media can't recognize that it's going to take a little bit of time to deal with the Strait of Hormuz. It's going to take a little bit of time to deal with some of the issues associated with the oil trade. And the fact of the matter is that oil prices were reduced drastically during the Trump last year of the Trump administration. And it is only because of the Trump administration that we're experiencing the prospect of additional reductions in oil prices in the coming months, and eliminating the ability of an Iranian regime to ever again put a stranglehold on the Strait of Hormuz as that they are attempting to do right now. As the readers and listeners, it is incumbent upon you to comment on the Badstream media and to recognize that news sources such as News Nation and the Wall Street Journal are places that you could find reasonable reporting. Again, please subscribe, follow, and like. And another shout out to Tiger Logic, that is the producer of all the effects that you see on these podcasts.